Alright, good morning everyone. We are here with break 460. It is another 26 League Heroes retail combo break featuring the 26 League Heroes retail case as well as the 26 League Heroes starter case, and that has the 40 starter packs in it, as well as the bonuses, which is a 26 League Heroes hobby box, as well as a 26 sticker album and box combo, with the bonuses getting randomised at the end of the break between all 17 teams. And that team list for this one is Broncos, Lee Marschall; Raiders, Peter Lowe; Bulldogs, Julian Pye; Sharks, Peter Lowe; Dolphins, Julian Pye; Titans, Stephen Casey; Manly, Terry Payne; Storm, Warren Stoddart; Knights, Scott McBryde; Cowboys, Scott McBryde; Eels, Craig Hyde; Panthers, Dean Mick; Rabbitohs, Sean Coffey; Dragons, Warren Stoddart; Roosters, Scott McBryde; Warriors, Chris Sando; and Tigers, Stephen Casey. Alright. Here we are. We can probably drop that down. There we go. Alright, well, we have our sticker box, and sorry, I'm just bringing the YouTube chat up while we finish talking. We have our sticker box and League Heroes hobby box, which gets randomised at the end of the break, as well as the album with the 5 bonus packs. Don't need them yet either. Let's get into this starter box case, whatever we want to call it. 2 new breaks listed this morning. We also have a double team Raz in the Facebook group for Newcastle, Knights and North Queensland Cowboys in break 461. Leaving only 3 spots in that break. So if that's sold out, we can do that one tomorrow. Alright, let's go. So yeah, I think we'll stick to doing 5 at a time, like we did the other day. Plastic's busted on that one. That's it. That's our 5. Let's go. Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. Morning, Lee. Good luck, mate. Junior Paulo for the Eels. Apasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Bradman Best for the Knights. And that's our first 5 done and dusted. Alright. Next 5. Don't forget to go and get your entry into this week's weekly Pick the Score giveaway. We are now up to a $75 gift card with nobody winning last week. Robert Toya for the Roosters. Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. And Jareem Buller for the Tigers. That's 10 down. League heads, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. League heads, Tom Dearden for the Cowboys. League heads, Harry Grant for the Storm. League heads, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Heavy Farnworth for the Dolphins. Big Tino for the Titans. Payne for the Broncos. Dylan Edwards for the Panthers. And James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Alright, well, we're halfway through the starter packs. Well, at least the first part of it anyway. So, let's get through the next lot. There we go, another 5 are ready to go. Dylan Walker for the Eels. Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. AJ Brimson for the Titans. Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Ruben Garrick for Manly. Did I miss one? We only did 4 last time. Alright, well, looks like we've got 6 for this one. I can't count. We obviously only did 4 in the last batch. Oh well. They all get done eventually. Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Jerome Hughes for Storm. Nico Hines for the Sharks. Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Alright, 10 to go. Let's see if we can actually count this time and do 5 and 5. Alright, another 5 ready to go. League heads, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Cameron Munster for the Storm. RTS for the Warriors. Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Will Penasini for the Eels. Alright, let's go. Last 5. And then we get to rip open 120 packets straight before getting into the retail case. Stay still. There we go. Let's go. League heads, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Terrell May for the Tigers. Valami kick out for the Bulldogs. Alafiana Khan-Pierre for the Titans. Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Alright. Get rid of that one. Out of our way. You can get rid of them as well. How good's that? And let's get into it. Good morning, Mr. Shags. Alright, league heads, Alehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Game Breakers Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Luminous Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Bang Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Red Triumph for the Knights. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Game Breakers Harry Grant for the Storm. Luminous Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Die cuts Bo Fermor for the Titans. Luminous Kuli Kefu for the Dolphins. We've got a gold triumph. Luminous Moses Leota for the Panthers. We'll put that on the table for the end. Game Breakers Liam Martin for the Panthers. Luminous Jermaine Hopgood for Eels. League Heads Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Game Breakers Clinton Gufferson for the Dragons. Luminous William Kennedy for the Sharks. Red Triumph for the Raiders. Luminous Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Die cut Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous Latu Finu for Tigers. League Heads Reese Walsh for Broncos. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. League Heads Ryan Pappenhausen for the Storm. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. League Heads Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Red Triumph for the Tigers. Luminous Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Die cut, Cody Nikorima for the Dolphins. Luminous, Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Die cuts, Tamale for the Raiders. Luminous, Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Bang, Renato Mulatalo for the Sharks. Luminous, Azali Hopkins for the Dragons. League heads, Isaiah Katoa for the Dolphins. Luminous, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. League heads, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Sean Russell for the Eels. Bang, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Casey McLean for Panthers. League heads, Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous, Chance Nicole Klokstad for the Warriors. League heads, Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous, Jerome Hughes for Storm. League head, Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Game breakers, Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Luminous, Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. Mercury, Jaden Campbell for the Titans, number 352. Addo Carr for the Eels. Bang, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous, Brighton Nicaragua for the Sharks. League heads, Jerome Lowe for Tigers. Luminous, Caitlin Ponga for the Knights. Game breakers, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Cody Walker for Rabbitohs. Alright, let's move this first lot out of our way. Game breakers, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Upside down, Luminous. Tui Kamika for Storm. League heads, RCG for Titans. Luminous, Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Mercury, Kurt Capewell for the Warriors. Number 177. Luminous, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous, Tegan Berry for the Dragons. League heads, Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Luminous, White for the Roosters. Bang Gahamat Shabarski for Broncos. Luminous, Sean Kepi for the Rabbitohs. League heads, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous, Payne Huss for Broncos. Bang Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Sebastian Chris for Raiders. Game Breakers, Whenua Pole for Tigers. Luminous, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. League heads, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. League heads, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Game Breakers, Anessa Biddle for the Sharks. Luminous, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Game Breakers, Tui Kamikamika for Storm. Luminous, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph, Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. League heads, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous, Kurt Capewell for the Warriors. Game Breakers, Tom Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous, Adam Whenua Blake for the Sharks. League heads Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Bang Katoni Stags for Broncos. Luminous Mitch Kenny for Panthers. Game Breakers Loco Pacifici Tonga for the Dragons. Luminous Marky Mark for Roosters. Bang Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Tom Gilbert for Dolphins. League heads Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luminous Cassie Tohi Hiku for the Eels. Game Breakers Mahalia Murphy for the Eels. Luminous Joseph Tarpanay for Raiders. League heads Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous Greg Marschall for Knights. Alifiana Campiera for the Titans. Luminous Billy Walters for Broncos. Game Breakers Alifiana Campiera for Titans. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Red Triumph for the Broncos. Happy Nichols Luminous for the Warriors. Bang Brian To'a for Panthers. Luminous Kuli Kefu for the Dolphins. Game Breakers Tanila Paseka for Manly. Luminous Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Bang Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. League heads Fanua Pole for Tigers. And Luminous Trent LaRoe for Storm. That was also packet number 60. So now halfway through the starter pack packets. Let's keep going. League heads Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous Zahara Temera for the Raiders. Red Triumph Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Luminous Brian To'a for Panthers. Get out. Game breakers. Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Luminous Dylan Walker for the Eels. Game breakers. Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. Bang Joash for the Eels. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. League heads Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. Luminous Luke Lolili for Tigers. Bang Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Philip Semi for the Titans. League heads Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Titans. Luminous Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Game breakers Trent LaRoe for Storm. Luminous Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. League heads William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Die cuts Sean Kepi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Bang Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous Emma Verin for the Sharks. Game breakers Alex Twal for Tigers. Luminous Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. League heads Tom Starling for the Raiders. Luminous Tamale for the Raiders. League heads Apposite Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous Falago for Storm. Game breakers Savage for the Raiders. Luminous Fogarty for Manly. Gladiators Mitchell Moses for the Eels, number 523. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. League heads Greg Marschall for the Knights. Luminous Trent LaRoe for Storm. Game breakers are Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Luminous Moses Leota for Panthers. Die cut Dean Mariner for the Broncos. Luminous Jermaine Hopgood for Eels. League heads Joash for Eels. Luminous Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Mercury Jack Bostock for the Dolphins, number 403. Luminous Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Die cut Oregon Kafusi for Sharks. Luminous Hugo Savala for Roosters. League heads Marky Mark for the Roosters. Luminous Lachlan and Galvin for the Bulldogs. Bang Alfiana Kanpi Era for Titans. Luminous Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Game breakers Luca Moretti for the Eels. Luminous Dylan Lucas for Knights. League heads Keon Colomatengi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. League heads Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Luminous Connor Watson for the Roosters. Bang Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Luminous Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Die cut Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous Dane Gagai for the Knights. And only 30 more packs to go out of our starter packs. We have an instant win. Gold Triumph and instant win. 2 big hits out of our starter packs so far. Hamol Olika R2 for Manly. Bang Brian Kelly for the Titans. And Luminous Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Bang Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Game breakers, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Isaac Tago for Panthers. Game breakers, Emily Bass for the Tigers. Luminous, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. League heads, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous, Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Gladiators, Luciano Leilua for the Dragons, number 129. Luminous, Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. Not sure what just happened there. League heads, Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous, Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. Die cut, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Game breakers, Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Luminous, Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Titans. Die cuts, Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Asai Iongi for the Eels. League heads, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Gladiators, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters, number 55. Luminous, Abby Church for the Eels. League heads, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Bang, Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Triumph, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Alefiana Campiera for Titans. Die cuts, Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Bang and Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. I've got some upside down. League heads Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous Gehamat Shabarski for the Broncos. Game breakers Payne Huss for the Broncos. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. We're back to the normal. Game breakers Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous Dylan Brown for the Knights. Bang Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Clinton Gutherson for Dragons. Die cuts Billy Smith for the Roosters. Luminous Isaiah Yo for Panthers. League heads Jareem Bowler for Tigers. Luminous Xavier Coates for Storm. Game breakers Tolotol Koala for Manly. Luminous Herbie Farmworth for Dolphins. Die cuts Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Luminous Jareem Bowler for the Tigers. Game breakers Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous Ethan Bullymore for Manly. Bang Tamir Martin for Warriors. Luminous Jesse Colhoun for the Sharks. And last packet out of our starter packs. Let's see what it has for us. Die cut Tom Starling for the Raiders. Luminous Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. And that finishes that. Alright, let's get rid of these. Get these boxes out of the case. And then get stuck in. Watch out, guys. Warren has a habit of getting doubles. He may see him with another double instant win. Or maybe it's his turn for a double golden triumph. That is them. Box number 1. There it is. Let's get them open. Dally M and Luminous Ethan Bullimore for Manly. Bang Jaden Campbell for the Titans. A Luminous Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Game Breakers Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous Kurt Capewell for Warriors. League Heads John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. League Heads Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous Campbell Graham for Rabbitohs. Die cuts Lachlan Galvin for Bulldogs. Luminous Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. League Heads Jack Williams for the Eels. Luminous Dream Buller for Tigers. Bang Isaiah Katoa for the Dolphins. Luminous Xavier Coots for Storm. Gladiators Reese Walsh for the Broncos, number 372. Luminous Alex Twal for Tigers. League Heads Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Die-cut RCG for the Titans. Luminous Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Game Breakers Tiana Penatani Gray for the Sharks. Luminous Abby Church for the Eels. Triumph, Alifiana Canberra for Titans. Luminous, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. League Heads, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous, Dylan Brown for the Knights. Game Breakers, Tamika Upton for the Broncos. Luminous, Tyron Wishart for Storm. Bang, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. League Heads, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Luminous, Ben Hunt for the Broncos. Game Breakers, KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous, Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Bang, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Luminous, Sam Verrills for the Titans. League Heads, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous, Bradman Best for the Knights. League Heads, Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous, Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Die Cuts, Xavier Coates for Storm. Luminous, Junior Paulo for the Eels. Game Breakers, Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous, Felice Kafusi for Dolphins. Red Triumph, Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous, Ethan Strange for the Raiders. League Heads, Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Luminous, Jack Williams for the Eels. Mercury, Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Luminous, Lachlan Ilias for Dragons. League Heads, Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Luminous, Max King for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Apasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous, Lyshan Albert Jones for the Warriors. Bang, Luke Brooks for Manly. Luminous, Reece Walsh for Broncos. Game breakers, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, KO Weeks for the Raiders. League heads, Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Game breakers, Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Luminous, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Die cuts, Clayton for Lalo for Manly. Luminous, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. League heads, Herbie Farmworth for Dolphins. Luminous, Jaden Campbell for Titans. Bang, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous, Bo Fermor for Titans. And that is box number 1 done and dusted. Alright. Let's go box number 2. Bang, Renato Mulatalo for the Sharks. Luminous, Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Game breakers, Lachlan Elias for Dragons. Luminous, Nafor White for Roosters. Die cuts, Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous, Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. League heads, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Game breakers, Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous, Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Die cuts, Mitch Kenny for the Panthers. Luminous, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. League heads, AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous, Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Bang, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous, Tommy Turbo for Manly. Game breakers, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Yes, please. League heads, Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Luminous, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. League heads, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous, Tamale for the Raiders. Bang, Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous, Emma Veron for the Sharks. Game breakers, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous, Samula Fonu for Tigers. Red Triumph for the Eels. Luminous, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Die cuts, Luca Moretti for the Eels. Luminous, Sean Kepe for the Rabbitohs. Mercury, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Number 64. Luminous, Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. League heads, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Oh, lucky I've got a coffee cup. Tiana Penatoni Gray for the Sharks. How good's that? Bang, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Terrell May for the Tigers. Game breakers, Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Titans. Luminous, Brendan Smith for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous, Stephen Crichton for Bulldogs. Die cuts, Samula Finu for Tigers. Luminous, Philip Semi for the Titans. League heads, Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous Dane Gagai for the Knights. Bang Brian Kelly for the Titans. Luminous Connor Watson for the Roosters. Red Triumph Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. League Heads Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Game Breakers Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. Luminous Dylan Walker for the Eels. Cheers. Die cut Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Zahara Temera for the Raiders. League Heads Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Brian To'a for Panthers. Game Breakers Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous Luke Lawlilly for Tigers. Gladiators Dylan Walker for the Eels, number 496. Luminous Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. League Heads Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Game Breakers Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. League Heads Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Bang Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tui Kamika for Storm. And last packet for our second box. League Heads Nelson Sofa Solomona for Storm. Luminous Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Alright, box number 3. Alright. Box number 3. Let's get her done. League heads Murray Talagi for Cowboys. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. Bang Falago for Storm. Luminous Cohen Hess for Cowboys. League heads Alex Twal for Tigers. Luminous Nico Hines for the Sharks. Game breakers Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Jerome Lowe for the Tigers. Die cuts Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Bang Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Luminous Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Game breakers Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. League heads Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers Cooley Kefu for the Dolphins. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. League heads Hudson Young for the Raiders. Luminous Jamie Chapman for the Titans. League heads Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Isaac Tago for Panthers. Mercury Moses Leota for Panthers, number 348. Luminous Alefiana Khan Piera for Titans. Red Triumph, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Luminous Addo Carr for the Eels. Game Breakers, Alifiana Campiera for Titans. Luminous Kale Iro for the Sharks. Game Breakers, Tanila Paseka for Manly. Luminous Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Bang, Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Luminous Lycan King Togia for the Dragons. Die cut, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous Hudson Young for the Raiders. League heads, Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Luminous Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Excuse me. Die cut, Aaron Clark for the Warriors. Luminous Apposite Coruscant for Tigers. League heads, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous Liam Martin for Panthers. Game Breakers, Mahalia Murphy for the Eels. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. Bang, Zach Labus for Cowboys. Luminous James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. League heads, Stefano Utokamanu for Storm. Luminous Yasmin Cleedsdale for the Knights. Game Breakers, Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Red Triumph for the Panthers. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. Game Breakers, Loco Pacifici Tonga for the Dragons. Luminous Leka Halasima for the Warriors. League heads, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Big Tino for the Titans. Die cuts, Thomas Jenkins for the Panthers. Luminous, Jason Saab for Manly. League heads, Sam Verrills for Titans. Luminous, Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Bang, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. League heads, Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous, Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. 4 packets left in box number 3. League heads, Isaiah Yeo for Panthers. Luminous, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Bang, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Luminous, Keezy Apps for the Tigers. Die cuts, Latu Finu for Tigers. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Last one for the box. Gladiators, Kurt Cakewell for the Warriors, number 123. 1, 2, 3. And Luminous Sai Yongi for the Eels to finish off the box. And straight in the box number 4. League heads, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Sanoa Taruva for Tigers. Die cuts, Tom Gilbert for Dolphins. Luminous, Will Penasini for the Eels. Game breakers, Cameron McInnes for the Sharks. Luminous, Jonah Pezzett for the Storm. Bang Lehe for Manly. Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. League heads Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luke Metcalf Luminous for the Warriors. Die cuts Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. And Sarah Tagatuki for the Tigers. Game breakers Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous Connolly Loomy Lou for Dolphins. Excuse me. Mercury Gehemet Shabarsky for the Broncos, number 317. Luminous Samuel Stonestreet for the Sharks. Bang Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Luminous Harry Grant for Storm. League heads Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous Renato Mulatalo for the Sharks. Game breakers Sanua Taruva for Tigers. Luminous Blaze Talagi for Panthers. League heads Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Luminous Tom Starling for the Raiders. Red Triumph Bradman Best for the Knights. Luminous Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. League heads Mitch Kenny for Panthers. Luminous Zach Labert for Cowboys. Game breakers Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Loco Tonga for the Dragons. League heads Payne Haas for Broncos. Luke Brooks Luminous for Manly. Die cuts Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Luminous Asaya Katoa for Dolphins. League heads Roger Tuivasa Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Bang Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Luminous Ben Trebojevic for Manly. League heads Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Tanila Paseka for Manly. Game Breakers, Val Holmes for the Dragons. John Bateman, Luminous for Cowboys. Bang Leka Halasima for Warriors. Luminous Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Cameron Munster for Storm. Die cuts for Largo for Storm. Luminous Brian Kelly for the Titans. Game Breakers, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Luminous Bailey Simonson for the Eels. Bang Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Jesse Southwell for the Knights. League Heads, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Luminous Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Red Triumph for the Titans. Luminous Katoni Stags for the Broncos. Game Breakers, Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Die cuts, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Isaiah Papali'i for Panthers. Game Breakers, Shaley Bent for Titans. Just had to double check. Jacob Carraz Luminous for the Bulldogs. League Heads, Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous Alex Seafarth for the Tigers. Bang KO Weeks for the Raiders. Luminous Keon Kolomatangi for Rabbitohs. Gladiators, Sanua Taruva for Tigers, number 309. Luminous Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. 2 packets left for the box. League Heads, Falago for Storm, and Luminous Jess Surgis for the Roosters. Game breakers, Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Box number 5. Bang, Reece Walsh for Broncos. Luminous Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Red Triumph, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous Luca Moretti for the Eels. League heads, Lehe Hopawate for Manly. Luminous Ben Hunt for Broncos. League heads, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors. Bang, KO Weeks for Raiders. Luminous Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights. Game breakers, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous Val Holmes for the Dragons. Die cuts, John Bateman for the Cowboys. Luminous Big Tino for the Titans. League heads, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Luminous Kale Iro for Sharks. Game breakers, Alex Twal for Tigers. Luminous Saya Yongi for the Eels. Die cuts, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. Luminous Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Red Triumph for the Dragons. Luminous Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Game breakers, Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Luminous Jason Saab for Manly. League heads Mitchell Moses for the Eels. Luminous Ryan Pappenhausen for Storm. Game breakers Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Gehamat Shabarski for the Broncos. League heads Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Luminous Jacob Preston for the Bulldogs. Bang Sanua Turuva for Tigers. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Game breakers Luca Moretti for the Eels. Luminous Clinton Gutterson for the Dragons. League heads Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Titans. Luminous Apisai Coruscant for the Tigers. League heads Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Luminous Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. Mercury and Nelson Asafa Solomona for the Storm, number 401. Luminous Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Game breakers Trent LaRoe for Storm. Luminous Jerome Luai for Tigers. League heads Keon Kolomatangi for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Hudson Young for Raiders. Bang Philip Semi for Titans. Luminous Lekahela Sema for Warriors. League heads Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous Hammer for the Dolphins. Bang Tyron Wishart for Storm. Luminous Sayo for Panthers. Die cuts Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Cohen Hess for Cowboys. Game breakers Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Luminous Nico Hines for the Sharks. Oh, get open. Gladiators Tui Kamikamika for Storm, number 441. Luminous Leheopawate for Manly. League heads, Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. Luminous Morgan Smithies for Raiders. Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Dean Mariner for the Broncos. League heads, Marky Mark for Roosters. Luminous Dylan Brown for the Knights. Game Breakers, Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous Isabel Kelly for the Roosters. Bang Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. 3 packets left for the box. League heads, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Luminous Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Alright, this is the last packet in box number 7, and we have a Game Breakers, AJ Brimson for the Titans and Liam Martin for the Panthers. No, box number 5 even. I thought, disappointing. Alright, I need to duck off to the toilet. I'll be back in just a sec. Alright, sorry about that. We are back and ready to get back into it with box number 6. Let me bring the YouTube chat back up. There we are. Give it a refresh because it seems to lag behind occasionally. Alright, league heads of Alami kick out for the Bulldogs. Max King Luminous for the Bulldogs. Bang Jason Taumalolo for the Cowboys. Luminous Billy Smith for the Roosters. Bang Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Tolator Koala for Manly. Game Breakers White for the Roosters. Luminous Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Die Cut Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Luminous Payne for the Broncos. League heads Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Game Breakers Harry Grant for Storm. Luminous Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Bang Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous Taylor Preston for the Bulldogs. League heads Tom Starling for the Raiders. Luminous Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Game Breakers Jamie Chapman for the Titans. Luminous Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Mercury Nico Hines for the Sharks. Number 403. Luminous Ethan Bullymore for Manly. League heads, Moses Leota for Panthers. Luminous. Whoa, look at the bubbling on that one. Don't know if we can see that. But remember that film, guys, that is supposed to be removed and it reveals the texture underneath. So even though that is pretty bad, yeah, don't worry. Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Game breakers, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. Luminous, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Bang, Dominic Young for the Knights. Luminous, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. We have a Daily M Predictor. Luminous, Abby Church for the Eels. League heads, Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Luminous, Spencer Lenu for the Roosters. Game breakers, Sartili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Die cuts, Matthew Feaguy for the Dragons. Luminous, Xavier Coates for Storm. Game breakers, Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous, Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Oh, it's another one that's already open. League heads, Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. Luminous, Dylan Edwards for the Panthers. Die cuts, Jaden Campbell for the Titans. Luminous, Lyshan Albert Jones for the Warriors. Red Triumph, Bronson Sherry for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Stefano Utakamanu for Storm. League heads, Jerome Hughes for the Storm. Luminous, Jason Tormalolo for the Cowboys. Game breakers, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Bo Fermor for Titans. League heads, Jacob Little for the Dragons. Luminous, Tyron Wishart for the Storm. Bang, Brian Totter for Panthers. Luminous, Alex Twal for the Tigers. League Heads, Cohen Hess for the Cowboys. Luminous, Braden Trindle for the Sharks. Gladiators, Moses Sulai for the Dragons, number 320. Luminous, Kira Dib for the Cowboys. Game Breakers, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous, Bradman Best for the Knights. Bang, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Sam Verrills for Titans. League Heads, Connolly Lumi Lou for Dolphins. Luminous, Felice Kafusi for the Dolphins. Die Cuts, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous, Junior Paulo for the Eels. Game Breakers, Jareem Buller for Tigers. Luminous, Lachlan Ilias for Dragons. Triumph, Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Ethan Strange for Raiders. 2 packets left for box number 6. League Heads, Greg Marschall for the Knights. Luminous, Dream Buller for Tigers. League Heads, Joash for Eels. Luminous, Herbie Farnworth for Dolphins. Box number 7. League Heads, Dylan Walker for the Eels. Luminous, Cameron Munster for Storm. Get open. Red Triumph, Chance Nico Klokstad for the Warriors. Luminous, Samuel Stonestreet for the Sharks. Game breakers, Dylan Egan for the Dragons. Luminous, Loco Pacifici Tonga for the Dragons. Bang, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous, Luke Brooks for Manly. Game breakers, Jerome Lowe for the Tigers. Luminous, Jamin Salmon for the Bulldogs. And a golden Triumph. League heads, Lindsay Smith for Panthers. Luminous, Isaiah Katoa for Dolphins. Die cut, Kurt Capewell for the Warriors. Luminous, Xavier Savage for the Raiders. League heads, Cody Nikarima for the Dolphins. Luminous, Georgia Hale for the Titans. Bang, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous, Josh Kerr for Dragons. Die cuts, Herbie Farnworth for the Dolphins. Luminous, Connolly Lumi Lou for Dolphins. League heads, Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Luminous, Mitch Kenny for Panthers. Game breakers, Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. Luminous, Ruben Garrick for Manly. Red Triumph for the Dolphins. Luminous, Adam Fanua Blake for the Sharks. League heads, Jason Saab for Manly. Luminous, Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Bailey Simonton for the Eels. Luminous, Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Bang, Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Luminous, Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Die cuts, Tyson Frizzell for Knights. Luminous, Zach Labert for the Cowboys. League heads, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Luminous, Jacob Saifiti for the Knights. Game breakers, Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Luminous Brian Kelly for the Titans. Gladiators Hamoli Olaka'atu for Manly, number 506. Bailey Simonson, Luminous for the Eels. League Heads, Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous John Bateman for the Cowboys. League Heads, Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Luminous Jesse Southwell for the Knights. Game Breakers, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous Luciano Leilua for the Dragons. Die Cuts, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous Katoni Staggs for the Broncos. League Heads, Sam Walker for the Roosters. Luminous Asaya Papalihi for Panthers. Bang Herbie Farmworth for Dolphins. Luminous Jacob Carraz for Bulldogs. Bang Val Holmes for the Dragons. Luminous Sam Walker for Roosters. Game Breakers, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Alex Seafarth for Tigers. League Heads, Reece Walsh for the Broncos. Luminous Keon Colomatini for Rabbitohs. Mercury, John Bateman for the Cowboys, number 46. Luminous Ali Latour for the Warriors. Die Cuts, Payne Huss for the Broncos. Luminous Jordan Ricky for the Broncos. League Heads, Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Luminous Jessica Surgis for the Roosters. Game Breakers, Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Luminous, Tanila Paseka for Manly. 3 packets to go for the box. Game Breakers, Jaden Campbell for Titans. Luminous, Mitchell Moses for Eels. League Heads, Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous, Harry Grant for Storm. Bang Asaya Yongi for the Eels. And Luminous, Renato Militalo for the Sharks. Alright, we've got 5 boxes to go. Jamie Humphries, die cut for the Rabbitohs. Luminous, Nathan Cleary for the Panthers. League Heads, Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. Luminous, Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers, Olivia Koenig for the Roosters. Luminous, Billy Walters for Broncos. Dally M. Start a new one. Luminous, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. League Heads, Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Greg Marschall for the Knights. Game Breakers, Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Luminous, Adam Fanula Blake for the Sharks. Bang Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. Luminous, Kuli Kefu for the Dolphins. Game Breakers, Sebastian Chris for the Raiders. Luminous, Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. League Heads, Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. Luminous, Appy Nichols for the Warriors. Gladiators, Jesse Ramian for the Sharks, number 115. Carl Lawton, Luminous for Cowboys. League heads, Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Don't forget, we've got the weekly Pick the Score giveaway only in the Facebook group. And while you're there, don't forget to check out the double team Raz, Newcastle Knights and Cowboys in 461. League heads, Xavier Coates for the Storm. Luminous Bailey Haywood for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Bang, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. League heads, Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Luminous Moses Leotta for Panthers. Mercury Lekahalasima for the Warriors. Number 171. Luminous Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Game breakers, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous Mackenzie Wheel for Cowboys. Die cuts, Wade Egan for the Warriors. Luminous Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Red Triumph, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Tyson Frizzell for the Knights. Bang, Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. Luminous Jalen DeGroot for Titans. League heads, Ethan Bullimore for Manly. Luminous Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders. Game breakers, Tamir Martin for the Warriors. Luminous Cassie Tohi Hiku for the Eels. Die cuts, Emery Gula for the Dragons. Luminous Marky Mark for the Roosters. Die cuts, Jalen DeGroot for Titans. Luminous Georgia Hale for Titans. League Heads, Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Tom Gilbert for Dolphins. Game Breakers, Patrick Carrigan for the Broncos. No, sorry, no more hobby case breaks. We have no more to do, so. Wade Egan, Luminous for the Warriors. Bang Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous Latu Finu for the Tigers. Red Triumph for the Dolphins. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. League Heads, Zach Lomax for the Eels. No, sorry. Not that I'm aware of. It's not on the website. Yeah. If it's not on the website, then we haven't got one. Tommy Deedon, Luminous for the Cowboys. Bang Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous Josh Kerr for the Dragons. Game Breakers, Ben Trebojevic for Manly. Luminous Jai Arrow for the Rabbitohs. League Heads, Phoenix Crossland for the Knights. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Bang Reese Walsh for Broncos. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. 3 packs to go for the box. League Heads, Anfanua Blake for the Sharks. Luminous Upside Down, Angelina for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers, Alex Seafarth for the Tigers. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. League Heads, Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Luminous Mitch Kenny for Panthers. Once again, clean these ones up and we will get stuck into box number 9. Hey, Warren. League heads Robert Toya for the Roosters. Glad to finally hear about that package making it. Marky Mark for the Roosters. Yeah, if they didn't send the same parcel to places it wasn't supposed to go. League heads Will Penasini for the Eels. Lunas Marata Nakor for the Warriors. Oh, he hasn't picked it up yet. It's at the post office. Yeah. League heads Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. Lunas Jermaine Hopgood for the Eels. Die cuts Adam Dewey for the Tigers. Luminous Moses Leotta for Panthers. Game breakers Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous Mackenzie Wheel for the Cowboys. Bang AJ Brimson for the Titans. Luminous Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Bang Jerome Hughes for Storm. Luminous Tom Gilbert for the Dolphins. League heads Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Luminous Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Oh, one hobby box. Nice. We have a Premiership Predictor. Luminous Lachlan Galvin for the Bulldogs. You want a hobby box for both of them, is that what you're saying? I was looking for and a or a, but you want a hobby box for the 2 instant wins? I'm not sure. League heads Max King for the Bulldogs. Adam Reynolds Luminous for the Broncos. Red Triumph Jason Saab for Manly. Just one of them. Rightio. Luminous Hugo Savala for the Roosters. Game breakers Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Wade Egan for the Warriors. Bang, Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tommy Dearden for the Cowboys. League Heads Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous Latu Fainu for the Tigers. Colour die cuts Jack Bostock for the Dolphins. Luminous Ezra Mam for the Broncos. League Heads Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Game Breakers William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous Keanu Kinney for the Titans. League Heads Jaden Sewer for the Dragons. Luminous Angelina for the Bulldogs. League Heads Terrell May for the Tigers. Luminous Jamie Humphries for the Rabbitohs. Bang Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Luminous Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Game Breakers Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous Billy Walters for the Broncos. Die cuts Zach Hosking for the Raiders. Luminous Joseph Tarpanay for the Raiders. League Heads Gahamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Greg Marzhew for the Knights. Game Breakers Olivia Higgins for the Knights. Luminous Corley Kefu for the Dolphins. Bang Campbell Graham for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Daniel Tupou for the Roosters. League Heads Alifiana Campiera for the Titans. Luminous Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Red Triumph Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Carl Lawton for the Cowboys. Game Breakers Herbie Farmworth for the Dolphins. Luminous Abby Nichols for the Warriors. Game Breakers Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Luminous Cassie Hickey for the Eels. League Heads Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Cameron McInnes Luminous for the Sharks. Game Breakers Billy Smith for the Roosters. Luminous Trent LaRoe for Storm. Bang Casey McLean for Panthers. Luminous Jamal Fogarty for Manly. Game Breakers James Fisher Harris for the Warriors. Luminous AJ Brimson for the Titans. Die Cuts Dylan Edwards for Panthers. Luminous Zach Lomax for the Eels. Gladiators Hudson Young for the Raiders, number 505. Luminous Kyle Flanagan for the Dragons. Mercury Corey Horsburgh for the Raiders, number 142. And how about a Luminous to match? And that's the end of the box. Do it. Alright, box number 10. Let's get it done. Bang, Clinton Gufferson for Dragons. Luminous Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. League Heads Fletcher Sharp for the Knights. Luminous Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Mercury Zach Lomax for the Eels, number 350. Excuse me. Luminous Blaze Talagi for Panthers. Game Breakers, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Tom Starling for the Raiders. League Heads, Keanu Kinney for the Titans. Luminous Tamika Upton for the Broncos. Bang Gehamat Shabarsky for the Broncos. Luminous Jesse Ramian for the Sharks. League Heads, KO Weeks for Raiders. Luminous Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Game Breakers, Valami Kickout for the Bulldogs. Luminous Mawaki Fotowaka for the Titans. League Heads, Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Luminous Mitchell Barnett for the Warriors. Die Cuts Sua Wong for the Roosters. Luminous Ben Trbojevic for Manly. Game Breakers, Sayakatoa for Dolphins. Luminous Senua Taruva for Tigers. Red Triumph for the Roosters. Luminous Will Penasini for the Eels. League Heads, Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Luminous Jonah Pezzett for the Storm. Blah, blah, blah. Get it out. A bang Atasai Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. League Heads, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. There's our instant win. Luminous Sarah Togatuki for Tigers. Game Breakers, Liam Martin for the Panthers. Luminous Samaima Torfa for the Raiders. Bang, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous, Lachlan Elias for the Dragons. League heads, Brian To'o for Panthers. Luminous, Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. Game breakers, Tegan Berry for the Dragons. Luminous, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Bang, RTS for Warriors. Luminous, Casey McLean for Panthers. League heads, Jerome Lowe for Tigers. Luminous, Chance Nicole Clockstad for the Warriors. Triumph, Fanua Pole for the Tigers. Luminous, Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Game breakers, Bo Fermor for the Titans. Luminous, William Kennedy for the Sharks. League heads, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Saitili Tupanua for the Bulldogs. Die cuts, Zach Lomax for the Eels. Luminous, Sean Russell for the Eels. Bang, Jareem Buller for the Tigers. Luminous, Azali Hopkins for the Dragons. Where are we at? Night last packet for the box. League heads, Moses Sulai for the Dragons. Luminous, Kurt Mann for the Bulldogs. Game breakers, Morgan Smithies for the Raiders. Luminous, Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. League heads, Ryan Pappenhausen for the Storm. Luminous, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Die cuts, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous, Max Plath for the Dolphins. Game breakers, Joash for the Eels. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Game breakers, Adam Fanua-Blake for the Sharks. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. Die cuts, Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Luminous Molly Olaka'atu for Manly. Gladiators, Ray Stone for the Dolphins, number 274. Luminous Jai Gray for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Connor Watson for the Roosters. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. Alright, another box done and dusted. Alright, box number 11. Bang Matthew Tomoko for the Raiders. Lunas Brighton Nakora for the Sharks. Gladiators, Connor Watson for the Roosters, number 360. Luminous Damien Cook for the Dragons. Game breakers, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous Hamoli Olaka'atu for Manly. Mercury Big Tino for the Titans, number 355. Luminous Dominic Young for the Knights. Bang Will Penasini for the Eels. Luminous Milwaukee Fodawaika for the Titans. League heads, Dylan Lucas for the Knights. Lindsay Collins for the Roosters. Game breakers, Hammer for the Dolphins. Luminous Jermaine Isako for the Dolphins. Game breakers, Damien Cook for the Dragons. Luminous, Cody Walker for the Rabbitohs. League heads, Jermaine Isako for Dolphins. Luminous, Ali Brigginshaw for the Broncos. Die cut, Ben Hunt for Broncos. Luminous, Casey McLean for Panthers. Game breakers, Hamoli Olika-Atu for Manly. Luminous, Jerome Hughes for Storm. League heads, Big Tino for Titans. Luminous, Ethan Sanders for the Raiders. Die cuts, Episode Carousel for the Tigers. Luminous, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. League heads, Aleha Pawate for Manly. Luminous, Lycan King Toya for Dragons. Bang Philip Semi for the Titans. Luminous, Chance Nico Cockstad for the Warriors. Game breakers, Nelson Asafa Solomona for Storm. Luminous, Saitili Tupanoa for the Bulldogs. Red Triumph, Nico Hines for the Sharks. Luminous, William Kennedy for the Sharks. League heads, Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons. Luminous, Sean Russell for the Eels. Triumph for the Tigers. Luminous, Isaac Tago for Panthers. League heads, William Kennedy for the Sharks. Luminous, Robert Toya for the Roosters. Game breakers, Yasmin Clydesdale for the Knights, Luminous Addo Carr for the Eels. League heads, Apasai Coruscant for Tigers. Luminous Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys. Bang Tommy Turbo for Manly. Luminous Tamir Martin for Warriors. League heads, Scott Drinkwater for the Cowboys. Samai Mataufa, Luminous for the Raiders. Die cut Angus Crichton for the Roosters. Luminous Reed Marnie for the Cowboys. League heads, AJ for the Rabbitohs. Jai Gray, Luminous for the Rabbitohs. Bang, Matt Burton for the Bulldogs. And Adam Dewey for the Tigers. League heads, Joash for Eels. Luminous Alefiana Campi Era for Titans. League heads, Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Jermaine McEwen for the Knights. Game breakers, Max King for the Bulldogs. Luminous James Tedesco for the Roosters. Bang Cameron Munster for Storm. Luminous Max Plath for Dolphins. League heads, Ben Hunt for Broncos. Luminous Cameron Murray for the Rabbitohs. Clive Churchill Predictor. Luminous Regan Campbell Gillard for the Titans. 3 packets left for the box. Game breakers, Bree Chester for the Cowboys. Luminous Jackson Purdue for the Cowboys. Die cuts, Dane Gagai for the Knights. Luminous Luminous Kurt Mann for Bulldogs. And last packet for the box. Game Breakers Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Zali Hopkins Luminous for Dragons. We should have enough boxes when we're finished. Alright, last one, box number 12. Die cuts Sean Bloor for Storm. Luminous Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. League Heads Adam Reynolds for the Broncos. Luminous Sean Kepi for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts Isaiah Yongi for the Eels. Luminous Tegan Berry for the Dragons. League Heads Brian Kelly for the Titans. Luminous White for the Roosters. Bang Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Luminous Tamale for the Raiders. Bang Jack Whiten for the Rabbitohs. Fletcher Sharp Luminous for the Knights. Game Breakers Nathan Cleary for Panthers. Luminous Lindsay Smith for Panthers. League Heads Liam Martin for Panthers. Luminous Jack Bostock for Dolphins. League Heads Hamoli Olika Atu for Manly. Luminous Brendan Smith for Rabbitohs. Mercury Clinton Gutherson for the Dragons, number 231. Luminous Tommy Turbo for Manly. League Heads Junior Paulo for the Eels. Luminous Xavier Willison for the Broncos. Game Breakers Jesse Colquhoun for the Sharks. Luminous Connor Tracy for the Bulldogs. Game Breakers Cameron Munster for the Storm. Luminous Largo for Storm. League Heads Ethan Strange for the Raiders. Luminous Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Die cuts Stephen Crichton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tiana Penatoni Grey for the Sharks. League Heads Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for the Warriors. Bang Roger Tuivasa-Sheck for the Warriors. Luminous Jack Williams for the Eels. Game Breakers Kira Dibb for the Cowboys. Luminous Terrell May for the Tigers. Game Breakers Emily Bass for the Tigers. Luminous Philip Semi for the Titans. Bang Kale Iro for the Sharks. Luminous Patrick Carrigan for Broncos. League Heads Cameron McInnes for Sharks. Luminous Dane Gagai for the Knights. Game Breakers Ruben Garrick for Manly. Luminous Connor Watson for the Roosters. League Heads Luke Metcalf for the Warriors. Luminous Ray Stone for the Dolphins. Red Triumph Brighton Nickera for the Sharks. Moses Sulai Luminous for the Dragons. Alright, we're getting towards the end of our box now. Die cuts Jake Clifford for Cowboys. Luminous Dylan Walker for the Eels. League heads, Kalen Ponga for the Knights. Luminous Zahara Temera for the Raiders. Game breakers, Alex Johnston for the Rabbitohs. Luminous Brian To'o for Panthers. Bang, Greg Marschall for the Knights. Luminous Luke Lorlilly for the Tigers. League heads, James Tedesco for the Roosters. Luminous Samula Fainu for the Tigers. Last number 7. Gladiators, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys, number 14. Luminous Murray Talagi for the Cowboys. League heads, Appeside Coruscant for the Tigers. Luminous Chanel Harris Tavita for the Warriors. 5 packets left. Die cuts, Ethan Bullimore for Manly. Luminous Blake Brayley for the Sharks. Game breakers, Kurt Catewell for the Warriors. Luminous Tui Kamika for Storm. Game breakers, Payne Haas for the Broncos. Luminous Emma Veron for the Sharks. Sebastian Chris Bang for the Raiders. Luminous Jake Trbojevic for Manly. Alright, lucky last. Red Triumph for the Cowboys. And Luminous KO Weeks for the Raiders. Well, that is all of our packets. So now we get to go back to the beginning and go through them. So first up, you might have remembered that the Gold Triumph was first, followed by the Instant Win. It is number 70 for the Cowboys, Murray Talagi. Scott McBryde with the Cowboys spot. Don't know how well we can see that still. Alright, next up we had an instant win. Here's one that I haven't seen actually hit an instant win for much at all. And that's Raiders. Peter Lowe with Raiders in this one. Congratulations. I've been seeing Select to put updates out or something for some of the instant win signatures. I haven't actually looked, so I'm not sure. And Dally M Predictor number 261. Ruben Cotter for the Cowboys. Next one, another Dally M number 267. Ezra Mam for the Broncos. And Gold Triumph for the team, number 48 for the Sharks. Peter Lowe with the Sharks. Alright, keep going. Dally M Predictor number 186. AJ Brimson for the Titans. Stephen Casey with the Raz win for Titans and Tigers in this one. Alright, next up, Premiership Predictor number 176 for the Rabbitohs. Alright, 2 hits to go and we will get into the giveaway, the bonus randomizer. Alright, another instant win. This one for the Dolphins, Julian Pye. Congratulations. Alright, lucky last. Clive Churchill, 122 for the Roosters. Who's got Roosters? Scott McBryde. Alright, guys. Well, that is the end of our hits and our packs. And as I mentioned, we do have our bonuses left to go. So these, along with the album and bonus sticker packs, will get randomized between all 17 teams. Let's just change our screens now and we can get that one done. Hopefully. Here it is. Make sure that's come up there and there. Alright. So don't forget, the winner gets the hobby box and the sticker box, as well as the sticker album, which also has the 5 bonus packs inside. Number 1, number 2, and lucky last, number 3, Scott McBryde with the Knights. Congratulations. We'll make sure they are sent out with your break cards. Don't forget to check out the 2 breaks listed this morning, as well as 461 only having a couple of spots left, with the new double team Raz listed this morning.